Welcome to the Pool Builder Podcast, presented by River Pools, where we have one mission: to elevate the swimming pool industry. Real conversations with industry experts on topics that will help you become a more successful pool builder. So get ready to get your learning on. Now, here's your host, Jason Hughes.
Today, our guest is Lily Samuels. Lily is the Vice President of Drakely Pool Company, located in Bethlehem, Connecticut. Drakely Pool Company is an award-winning luxury design build firm specializing in concrete science and construction, particularly shotcrete applications, techniques, and standards. Their award-winning projects and educational articles have graced the pages of such publications as Watershape Magazine, Shotcrete Magazine, Aqua Magazine, Luxury Pools, Pool and Spa News, Concrete International Magazine, Better Homes and Gardens, and Ocean Home Magazine. As a member of the Genesis 3 Design Group, the Society of Watershape Designers, APSP, the Northeast Pool and Spa Association, the American Shotcrete Association, and the American Concrete Institute, Drakely Pool Company has played an active role in the education of both swimming pool builders and shotcrete professionals around the world. As Vice President of Drakely Pool Company, Lily Samuels spearheads client relations and works to continue to provide and improve upon the high standards of excellence that Drakely Pool Company has come to represent. So, hello, Lily, and welcome to the Pool Builder Podcast.
Thanks, Jason. Thank you very much.
Yeah, it's this is very interesting to have you on the show because I feel like I'm excited about this interview because I feel like you come from a very unique perspective, one that we might not come across that often as pool guys in the pool industry, and mainly because you come from the perspective of one who did not grow up in the industry like a lot of us did. Yeah. You're also a female, definitely a unique perspective there, and you also work with a very high-end clientele. And so I'm very interested to get inside your head, figure out how you guys work and operate, and how it is that you guys have become so successful and how you continue to improve. So maybe we could start off by maybe tell us a little bit about how you found yourself in the pool industry. How did it all get started?
Well, it's interesting because I think a theme that we're going to discuss through our conversation is education. And that's really how I got involved. I was an intern for Bill Drakely at Drakely Pool Company in college, and I very quickly started to support the sort of prolific production of articles, PowerPoint presentations, seminars that Bill was giving through Genesis 3, through the APSP. And I stayed a part of that, even though my professional endeavors took me elsewhere for the next number of years. I really stayed engaged because it was so fascinating to watch this body of knowledge not only grow, but really become disseminated. And that was my introduction to the industry.
So you were an intern with Drakely Pool Company. So you came in really not. That was your first glance at the pool industry, getting in there, and you kind of stepped right into, the top of the food chain, so to speak, in terms of, very established, credible, well-rounded, integral company, and so that was
probably blind luck.
yeah. So what were your first impressions coming into that situation?
Well, first impressions of the company was that I was someplace very special. Bill has a big reputation for staunch support of solid construction practices, and our projects, at the time his projects, really spoke for themselves. I mean, I was struck by the artistic quality that they all had. So I knew that I was stepping into something that was interesting and that had potential and that was dynamic and that in itself had room for growth. When you're building something so beautiful, it's hard not to get excited about that. So I was struck by that. But of course, it was eye-opening. I mean, this is heavy construction. I mean, at the end of the day, we're doing really, we're building impressive, big, hulking structures, and that was a new world for me. Coming to understand the science, the practices, the technique. I'm a lifelong learner. I will never stop absorbing, and so to just throw myself into that world was exciting. It was a challenge, but I also came from with, well, having returned, now and serving as the vice president as the company. I have a professional background that I bring with me, and I can sort of compare between what I saw then, or much earlier when I got connected to Drakely, and what I see now in the company. But also I can look out at the industry and say, this is interesting. There's room for improvement here, or this is really great. This is a real strength of the industry.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Did you find that you were intimidated by the whole construction aspect of it?
No.
No?
No, not to get personal, but my father was a blue collar worker, actually built the house that I grew up in, worked with his hands all his life, and I actually would go to work with him and work in his print shop. He ran Heidelberg presses, and so I've just been exposed to, hands-on work my whole life, and I love technical work. I think it's so rewarding when you have a product. If you do it well, it's successful, and it's almost formulaic in that way. And there's a great deal of satisfaction. So not at all intimidated, but challenged.
Yeah.
Because those standards are important, and so it was just a boatload of knowledge that I had to absorb, and I enjoyed it.
Yeah. So what's interesting is, in just listening to you, because I'm reflecting on our own company here in the conversations I have with other professionals, and it seems like the biggest challenge for not just in the pool industry but in all businesses is finding the right people. And
Right.
it sounds like when you came in, you said that there was just something special there. So I think that's what really attracts the right people.
That's right.
It's a lot. If you study what motivates employees, the money is not at the top of the list
That's right.
as a motivator for the right person. So, like, what was it that was so special about? And you kind of elaborated on it, but like, what got you? What brought you in there?
The people.
Okay.
The people. And I cannot emphasize that enough. I mean, Bill is a dynamic businessman. He's a great partner as we grow the business, and that's exciting. He really lets me, implement ideas and bring fresh stuff to the table.
Okay.
But also, our guys are fantastic.
Yeah.
I have the deepest respect for them. I mean, they are local, really well-respected members of the community,
Mm-hmm.
and they're artists. They're craftsmen with what they do. I mean, whether they're tying steel or shooting concrete or running the machine and grading around the site, I mean, they're doing it with such precision and character, and I find myself learning from them,
Right.
from their ethic. I mean, they inspire me, and I'm humbled to work with people of such excellent character. And so 100% it's the people. And I think if we were to make another correlation, how did I get involved in the industry? It was relationships. It was because I had started a rapport of respect and with the company, and that's what brought me back 100%. Because with the right people, you can do anything. With the right team, you can go to the moon.
Yeah. Well, I listen to people talk just in general, and I listen to people talk about business owners talk about their employees, and 99% of the time, they're complaining about it, and they're saying, you can't find good help these days. These young kids, they don't know how to work.
Right.
You hear all these negative things, and and it is tough to find the right people. But also, the question I have is not to you, but just in general to the people out there, to that business owner who just likes to complain that he can't find good help. Mm-hmm. What are you doing, to make your business one that attracts the right type of person?
Right.
Because what we found here at River Pools is that the right people, they are out there. And sure, maybe you have to cull through quite a few folks to get to the right people. But as we've been in business about 15 years, not all that long, but
Mm-hmm.
we have managed to put together a really good team too. And I think that some of those same principles that you mentioned, like you have the ability to you have freedom to create within your workspace, and you can
Right.
go in and you can exercise your what really makes you passionate about your job. And that's one thing that I think that I've learned, because at first I feel like, at least as a boss and a business owner, I was, my partner Jim likes to say I had my claws and everything. I wouldn't retract my claws and I wouldn't give people the space. And he really taught me that. And now what happens is you give people an opportunity and they flower.
Right.
And they own it, and it becomes their own thing, and it's a beautiful thing to see that. And then that person goes, and that starts to build that culture, to where one by one you start to build this amazing team, like you guys have certainly done. So I think that's a good takeaway for those who are listening out there, because we all have the same challenge. It's all a matter of finding the right people.
And there is certainly, I don't disagree with the assessment that it's tough to find good people. The company started with some of the right guys, and they've been with us since the beginning, and they're the backbone. My lead foreman, particularly, and nothing would get done without Dan LaRusso. But certainly, we're hiring every year, and people leave every year. But there are problems, as with any business, any hiring business. You're going to have turnover. But if there's something that I could say, it's not so much certainly you have to have the benefits. You need to pay well, and you need to take care of your employees. That's baseline. You're not going to attract the kind of employee that you want if you're not willing to also be offering what they're looking for. That's just the truth.
Yep.
But another thing I've learned, and we just hired a fantastic member of our internal office team, and she's just a rock star. And I would have never thought that we could have landed her.
Mm-hmm.
But she was drawn, not necessarily because of the employment offering, but she was drawn to the brand. She was drawn to us, to our work, to what I spend most of my day promoting. So I think that that's a really important key, is if you want to, attract cream of the crop, you need to make your work environment, and honestly what you're putting forth, attractive to that sort of person who wants to be linked to that.
Yes.
So there's great dividends to having a really compelling, I don't want to say ethical, but I'm just thinking about this because she was drawn to the fact that we are just committed to quality.
Mm-hmm.
That was interesting to her, because she knows that wherever you go, you're either going to be with a company that is foraging in that direction or has other priorities. So the fact that we are upfront with that as a priority was attractive to her. So I would say to people who are looking to hire, make sure that your brand is visible to those people.
Awesome. You mentioned the importance of relationships earlier, and we've talked a lot about the employee-employer kind of dynamic, and what it takes to attract the right people, keep the right people. What about relationships with clients? I know that seems to be your thing. So can you just talk a little bit about the importance of that relationship, how you develop the relationship?
Yeah, I spend a lot of time thinking about this, and one of the things that is a mantra for me is that the client is not the enemy. The client is a partner.
Mm-hmm.
It is not an antagonistic relationship where they're trying to undercut me, or they're trying to pull one over, or they're trying to get free work. So many things that we hear tossed around. They're trying to achieve a certain end goal. They're trying to get a certain product. And I'm trying to grow my company grow my reputation, and do really good work. Um, there's a marriage there, and in no way do those priorities have to be misaligned. So I think of my client as a partner to me, and I talk to them like that from the first moment we meet. I am so excited for what we can do for them. I'm so excited about what this project is going to do for their quality of life, how it's going to beautify the space, how awesome that they're undertaking it now. I'm so glad that you got in touch. This is right up our alley. Let's move forward. What do you think?
Right.
And then I engage them, and I learned so much of this from Bill Drakely. This is by no means like a proprietary formula that I came up with. But then we start to engage, and we start to spitball and throw ideas back and forth. What are you going to use the space for? What have you always wanted in an outdoor space? Et cetera, et cetera. And then they start to feel super engaged, and like they're going to be heard, and their priorities are going to be really highly respected. Yeah. And then I think once that's done, let's say then we've signed the project because we see that we're very much aligned, they want to move forward, then communication is key. That's the other thing. The client is a partner, and then the client wants to be communicated with. Yeah. And to be fair, there are some clients that are like, I've been in one of your pools, I trust you, it's beautiful, just do it.
Yeah.
And we love those.
Oh, the rollovers, man, they're great.
It's so great. Yeah. And we, of course, keep them informed, but they don't want to be involved in everything. Sure. But
the trust is there.
The trust is there.
Yeah. Just
but
make it happen.
For the majority, and it's not to say that they don't trust us, but the majority, I like to think of it this way. I pretend that the client is me. I would like to be informed. Mm-hmm. I would like to be involved. I would like to be kept abreast of developments in the field. For instance, I have found that most clients do not like to receive extra bills without some sort of forewarning and explanation. Yeah. And yet there are, and that's unavoidable. I mean, we say, very clearly that conditions in the field, until you put a shovel in the ground, you don't know necessarily what you're going to find.
Yes.
And so that's a part of our business, and I know it's certainly part of what you're doing as well, and that's just a reality. But it does not hurt to pick up the phone. You can't sneak, you really can't sneak much by a client, especially not an invoice.
And when you try, and when it's recognized by them that you tried,
right,
you've obliterated your credibility.
Right.
And it sounds to me like you're coming from a place of your initial reproach before the project and during the project is coming from a place of how can I serve you?
Right.
And I think that I have, within my own self over the years, when we first started, I think I was a little, it was a period where there's some uncertainty, in terms of to walk into a backyard, I always wanted the best for the client. I also wanted to make sure that we were profitable, but I also had some uncertainties about my own abilities, and I think it took some years to get out of the way of myself. And now, and I think so that's one play. I guess what I'm looking at is different perspectives we can approach a job from. One is from a place of uncertainty. One is from a place of I want what I want for my own business. I see the client as a dollar sign. And what you're saying is you guys approach the place from a perspective of service. Like how can I enhance your life? How can we reach this together mutually? And I've found over the years, as I've come to that same perspective, that the way that I view the backyard, the client, all the aspects of their house, all these awesome little details, now we can make it cohesive, make it all integrated, and it really seems to flow better when I come from that place.
Absolutely.
I think that a lot of pool guys out there, they may approach a job from a perspective of how profitable can it be, and I think that when you're in it for yourself, it's never a win-win scenario. It's going to come out in some way, either in your business ethics or your communication process, or in some way it's going to come across cold and incomplete.
Yeah.
And I think the only way to get a fully organic project where there's, everybody's in it together is that place of service.
I agree.
So how do you, we'd spoke beforehand in talks about how you get in the mind of your client, how you come to understand their needs, and how you come to work through the design process and end up with that end result. How do you get to know your client so well?
Well, from the first moment we meet, we're looking for a personal connection. Again, it just all goes back to the client as partner, or the client as friend, or even the client as me, human being with needs for the space. Maybe maybe that's for the grandkids. Maybe it's for exercise, stress reduction. Maybe there is, God forbid, but maybe there's, a long-term illness where the therapeutic nature of the spa or a lap pool or an exercise bar, it's all going to be really good for quality of life. It's building trust where we can be told that and incorporate that and be mindful as we design the space. Asking, that's a great first step, is just being willing to ask the question. And then, things come out as, like I said, with the communication during the life of the project, you start to understand your clients' idiosyncrasies, their quirks, their preferences, how they, what they're sensitive to or what they really appreciate. And that's just being, attentive. It's just paying attention. And then, by the end of the project, and we've had a couple have not gone so well, but by the end of the project, we're bringing over a bottle of wine and sitting down on the front porch and just, having a toast to a really successful project. And so I think what that tells you is that we became friends.
Yes.
And so how do you become a friend?
Mm-hmm.
That's really the question. How do you truly come to understand your client? Well, how would you build a friendship?
Yes.
On mutual trust and communication. That's the question that I think every professional has to ask themselves.
I think that's a great point. And it's amazing how far that relationship will take you in terms of when things come up during the project, and they always do. Yeah. How that relationship, if it's mutual, will actually come first, and it will allow you to overcome obstacles, whether it's a shortcoming on our own side, something that came up that's unavoidable. But it's a beautiful thing when you can find that client and build that relationship. To me, that's really what it's all about. And but on the flip side of that, how do you handle that? Because they don't all go like that, and inevitably you're going to have people that are more difficult to work with. How do you work with that difficult client that seems to put up a wall? And how do you work with that?
Professionalism.
Yeah.
Just a clean professional demeanor, still respectful, still deferent, still wanting to involve them, still giving them the same level of communication. It's certainly not about shutting them out.
Sure.
As any professional, anybody, in any business, you're going to have clients who either don't want to talk to you, don't respect you, don't think what you're doing is important, don't see the value. They just see you as rendering a service that they're paying for, and they probably think that they're being overcharged. It's, but that's the same for someone walking into a doctor's office, yes. Someone commissioning a piece of art, or paying for their lawn to be mowed. We all have to deal with that. I think it's just respect. I think it's acknowledging it, being straightforward, being like I said, professional, and also having all your ducks in a row. At the end of the day, like, a client might not value what you're doing the way you do, or the way one of your more friendly clients will. But if you can conduct yourself in a fair and professional, transparent manner from the business end, no one can argue with it. Keep your nose clean. And that's for those difficult clients. I think that's what you can avoid some of the stickier situations that at the end of a job, someone's not happy, or, there's disagreement on how something was handled. I mean, if your paperwork is good, you've been transparent all along, had good communication, I think that's how, not to get down to brass tacks, but I think that's how a business can protect themselves.
Yeah.
And ultimately, take care of their bottom line when there's a difficult or antagonistic client coming their way. And no one wants to talk about that, but that's reality.
Yeah, it happens.
Yeah.
I asked the same question of my good friend Bill Camus. He's over at one of the owners of Thursday Pools. He's built multi-million dollar homes, so he's been involved with a lot of high-end projects, a lot of high-end clientele. And I asked him the same question: how do you handle the difficult customer? And he said, Jason, I just kill him with kindness. And
right.
I'll never forget that. That was definitely a main takeaway for me.
That's
But
good.
I had an interesting. We recently, just this week or last week, we had an interesting encounter with a client, and this was a person who is extremely analytical, and like every detail had to be perfect, which is great. I mean, we love the
Sure.
analytical type. I mean, it works because we tend to run, not that we're perfect, but we run a pretty tight ship. And there were some things that came up during the project, like you said, you don't know till you put the shovel in the ground,
Right.
and things that no one could anticipate.
Right.
And it just became this big, huge, intense. I mean, he couldn't sleep. He wrote pages of letters. I mean, this was really, really bothering him. And I had a conversation with him, and through that conversation, we just talked. I mean, I just was willing to just talk with him about it and let him get it all out.
Right.
And the next morning, we got an email saying, you know what, I'm letting it go. I trust you guys. It's all good from here on out. We'll have no more of these issues. And
Yeah.
that doesn't usually happen. So, but anyway, I think it just speaks to the willingness to be able to listen to a client, hear them out and not get defensive and get your ego out of the way. Let them hear what they have to say, truly understand where they're coming from, and then you just reply in a genuine way,
I mean, I think a really good word here is compassion or empathy. And empathy is the ability to put yourself in someone else's shoes. And, if I were undertaking a very expensive project for, a high value addition to my living space, and it was not going well, or in my view, it wasn't as I expected, and, I maybe feel like due diligence wasn't done, or that it wasn't disclosed, I wasn't prepared for this eventuality, would I be upset? Probably. Would I, as a
Exactly.
homeowner, have some feelings about that? Well, yeah,
Exactly.
I should, because I don't understand. I mean, that's not my business. I don't understand the technicalities. It doesn't all make sense to me, and so I have an automatic reaction. Absolutely. So
Yeah.
I think that if you can put yourself in your client's shoes and be willing to, turn the tables, at least in your mind, just kind of trade roles. I think that can go a long way in adjusting your attitude, because at the end of the day, you're the one who's responsible for your attitude.
That's right. Exactly.
You're the professional, and you have to finish the job, and they're allowed to yell and scream, and you are not.
That's right. Hopefully. Well, you're not allowed to, but anyway, that is a great point. That is a great point. All right, changing gears a little bit.
Yeah.
Let's talk about some trends that you're seeing in the industry from any standpoint, from a design standpoint, from a customer demand standpoint. What are you seeing out there?
Everyone seems to know about chlorine alternatives now.
Okay. Yeah.
I know that there are a couple white papers that were issued about just consumers being concerned about chlorine, like being able to smell it, having it be obvious to bathers. And I've definitely seen that. We use ozone sanitation, organic ozone, through Clearwater Tech out of California. They've been with us for a long time, and we just find that they make a really fantastic product. So we feel very comfortable in recommending that to clients, and I think that's really important when you are suggesting not new technology. It's not new, but certainly a non-traditional way of sanitizing the pool. It's really important to trust the product, and so we have been seeing a lot of that. A lot of people are wanting to use pools. I was thinking about this. They're wanting to use their pool as a multi-purpose space.
Okay.
Um, there are, of course, clients who still want the 9 foot deep pool for the cannonball, and really that's just for diving and
Yep.
and being crazy.
One-dimensional pool. Yep.
Right. But so like I can't actually tell you. I think I've had maybe 4 or 5 projects this year where it's been a 3.5 to 5.5 deep pool in terms of depth, long enough for a good lap. And the shallow end is maybe it's 3.5 at the shallower side of the shallow end, but then we'll lower the floor to 4 foot depth so that the person in the lap lane can do a kick turn, can have a nice turn. So that's definitely for the athletic person in the family. But then maybe there are grandchildren, and maybe we have someone who really benefits from being in the space and being outdoors, and they just want to be able to lounge, but they don't want a ton of decking, and they don't want the whole shebang. So what we'll do is an enlarged step detail, like a sun shelf, thermal shelf, where our corner step, the first plane is very wide, so you can put a chair and just sit with your feet in the water. You can play with your baby or your grandbaby, and it becomes a really great multi-purpose space, particularly for families. And then also we've seen a lot of requests for what we do. It's called a deep end bench, or a long wall bench, where it's a bench the entire one length of the wall of the long wall in the pool, and that's really fantastic for entertaining. So
yes.
We've got an entertainment use, we've got family friendly, and we've got a pool that's also accommodating to the athlete, and that, I think, is indicative of just the way we live our lives now. I mean, we're trying to streamline. We want spaces, we want gadgets, we want experiences, vacations where you can hit all those high points, and consumers, I think, are definitely going for that now.
Yeah, that is very interesting. You all build shotcrete pools.
Yes.
We build fiberglass pools, and but we're finding the same exact thing. In fact, depth is a kind of an interesting topic for us because we've taken a different position. With a fiberglass pool, you design the shell. That's what you have. There's no modifying the shape, and the depth issue is something that we've kind of taken on as a company, in that a lot of the depths out there are a lot deeper. It's like 6.5 feet, 6 to 7 feet deep, and we've just in my own experience and in my business partners, our own experience using pools, we have more fun in pools that are shallower.
That's right.
We're not going to sit there and tread water for no reason. We want to be able to goof off and do the cannonball and all the stuff off the side, but we also want to be able to use the entire pool.
Right.
And I tell you that the consumer, I think we're ahead of the curve a little bit. Our consumer, anyway, isn't seeing it that way yet, and we're not trying to shift that, but we feel like that's going to be. I think that's going to be a natural progression. I think that it's funny if you study the way that we've used pools in America for the past, couple decades. I got in the industry when I was 16, and everything that I was exposed to was a 20 by 40, 8 foot deep, pool, and it was totally just a one-dimensional vessel, and everybody would just kind of accumulate in the shallow end. Then you might have some kids jumping off the diving board.
Right.
But it's funny you mentioned the tanning shelves, the bench seats, and the depths. We've really evolved in America the way that we use pools, and we've gotten a lot smarter about it. And you had mentioned UV or ozone, and so what's your take on salt, on saltwater pools?
Well, what Bill, I've learned much of what I know through Genesis and through honestly working with and writing with Bill, and our take on it is that salt actually gets you closer to chlorine than you want it to be in the first place, just by virtue of the fact that it's called a salt chlorine generator. It's all happening on the other end of your mechanicals, of course, But if you really want to be chemical free, that's not, you're going in the wrong direction. It's also, we've found on our own pools, and we'll do them, at client preference, of course. We'll, client first, but it's more aggressive on the plaster. It's more aggressive on bather's skin, bathing suits over time. It's tough on the heater, and so we find that, for instance, Bill tells the story all the time. He built his sister's pool in Clearwater, Florida, and she doesn't use her heater because it's Florida, and she has a glass tile almost throughout. So that's fine. A salt pool in that environment, actually, that's pretty ideal. You don't have a lot to lose with that, but up here in the Northeast, where the majority of our pools are a great plaster finish for that really beautiful traditional look, it's tough. It's tough on it. And so, we prefer the ozone just because it's the same technology that's used to sanitize bottled water. In the long term, it's a much healthier environment. And if I could just, now that I'm thinking about it, I think that's what my client is looking for. They're building a pool. It's not a small investment, and these people spend probably a lot of time thinking about their health. They're probably exercising a lot. They're probably eating well. They're probably thinking about how they can be, the healthiest versions of themselves. And it wouldn't make any sense for them to put all of this effort into, we're partnering with us and building a pool and paying for it, and for it to be, a chlorinated environment. It doesn't quite jive.
Gotcha.
So yeah,
I think that's interesting. So do you find it with your ozone pools, do you need a low residual of chlorine, or is it a chlorine free?
No, we will always have a chlorinator as a backup, as a very minimal secondary backup sanitation. It's just, to my mind, it's safer. Yeah. It's just a stopgap. It's just a support, a very low dose that is not going to be noticeable in any way. It's just nice to have it because, at the end of the day, I don't want my client to notice the functioning of the pool.
Very good.
I don't want them to get into the pool and say, it's green, or, ooh, what's wrong? Is the ozone not working? I don't want them to think that. So with a backup sanitation, at least there's something else that can be functioning should the ozone unit go down until we can get there and service it. It's just about making it seamless.
Sounds like your clients are real happy with it, and
no complaints so far.
Yeah, that's great.
Yeah.
So this has been great so far. I wanted to ask you a few more questions. One, if you could share one piece of advice with the pool builders out there in the world, what would you say to them?
There's like a word that keeps coming up as I think about this. It's elevate. Mm-hmm. And you have it on your sign. Elevate the discussion. Elevate your practices. Elevate your people. I think we were talking about this when we had our initial phone call, but it's easy, and I know it as a person running a business. It's easy to cut corners. It's sometimes preferable to cut corners. Sometimes you stand to benefit in the short run by cutting corners. And one example that we were discussing is in your concrete mix. Now I know you're fiberglass, but we're shotcrete, and we're big shotcrete, and we far and away exceed industry minimum standards for strength in our concrete. We think that's important here in the Northeast. We take it very seriously to build a really strong monolithic animal in the ground. But anyway, in putting together our mix, it's easy, especially when you're doing volume, to say, just cut the Portland, cut the binder, because that's expensive. That's the expensive part. And to, screw up your water to cementitious material ratio by adding too much water. You can stretch that material by screwing around with it. And but at the end of the day, who are you cheating? yeah, you're cheating your client because they're not getting as good of a product as you could put out. But you're also cheating yourself in the long run.
Yes.
You're losing out on the opportunity to develop a reputation, because those pools will eventually come back to bite you. That's a couple of them will. That's just been what we've seen, and I think almost everyone in the industry has experienced at one point or another. And so every project is an opportunity to invest in how you're perceived in 5 years. I'm obsessed with the brand. I'm obsessed with thinking about how are we perceived and how do we communicate our identity as a company, as a firm. How do we get that across to the client? Well, by elevating our standards right now on every project we're doing, I'm investing in how my clients 5 years down the road are going to see me. That's my advice.
That's great. It makes me think of a quote I heard recently, and it's what we do and what happens to us are really the same thing.
Totally.
Yeah, I mean, like the decisions we make, that manifests in what happens to us. I mean, it's exactly what you're saying. If we cut corners on a job, it's going to come back on us. If we work to elevate, it's going to come back to our benefit. When it comes to elevating, what role do you think continued education plays in that?
Huge. And it's a little, sometimes people say, oh, education, and that really is the drum that we beat at the firm. And Drakely Industries, our sister company that Bill and I also run, is a shotcrete training, consulting, review, it's a consulting firm. And so education is bread and butter for us. And it's also very important. It's near and dear to Bill's heart. So this is all we talk about. When we're in the office and we're talking about long-term strategy, education is always part of it. So what role do I think it has? I think it's essential. Not only is it essential to that elevation, to elevate your own practices and improve your brand and improve your product. The pool builder stands to gain immediately by learning. Fewer problems, fewer hassles, greater client communication and satisfaction just by knowing what you're doing or improving on what you've been doing. So that's a given. But also, I think when we educate not only ourselves but also our industry partners, so that means reaching out to the landscape architects, to the engineers, to maybe even the interior designers who are specifying the nature of the project by saying, hey, this is what the American Shotcrete Association calls for. This is the minimum standard for strength through the American Concrete Institute. You should really consider incorporating this into your spec, because it will weed out, at least in theory, it will weed out those who aren't going to adhere to those standards. What happens then is you have more reputable firms taking on a project, which leads to greater success rates in a project, which elevates the industry's reputation. And I don't have to, really convince you. In fact, I think this was one of the first things you said to me, is that pool guys have a reputation. It's not necessarily an industry that's well perceived. Yeah. And I think that by ensuring that not only are we ourselves very well versed in standards for proper construction, but the people who are calling for these jobs also know what to look for. I think you stand to lift the whole industry off the ground.
Yes. Yep. Rising tide raises all ships.
That's right.
For sure.
Cheers.
So, looking back, since you've been in the pool industry, since the first day you walked into Drakely Pool Company to now as the vice president, what would you say that you're most proud of that you've accomplished in the industry?
Oh man, it's funny. This is the hardest question for me to answer. I'm always looking forward. For your viewers, Drakely Pool Company is, at its heart, it's a family business. Bill started it in 2000 with his wife Christine. It's employed, the closest friends to the family through the years. Everyone is it's a very tight bond. But it's also in that way, it's a mom and pop shop, and that's beautiful. I mean, that's American, and I would never. I only have admiration for companies that have started that way and continue to keep their doors open in this difficult economic climate. I mean, it's really fantastic. But for me personally, I think my greatest achievement thus far, the thing I'm most proud of, is just professionalizing that environment even more. Creating processes and systems so that the wheel is greased, so that we can move more quickly, so that these amazing, admirable practices, sort of the core tenets of the company that Bill and Christine had from the get-go, now they are institutionalized. Now they are part of how we operate. They're part of how our clients see us. They're part of how our colleagues in the industry see us. And it's been my honor to learn, what those core goals and tenets were, and to say, okay, here's how it's going to just disseminate through the whole company, whether it's through accounting or it's through our project management, our client communication. It's kind of nerdy. It's like definitely on the back end management side, but I think professionalizing the firm has been a big accomplishment for me.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like what you're doing is you're taking the core principles and you're integrating them into every aspect of the company, and that's not nerdy. That's cool, And this has been great. It's been a great conversation with you. I think we've really hit on some big ideas.
Yeah.
I think we've really talked about things like relationships and service and compassion and integrity and the things that really motivate us. And I think that those things really, if that's where we're coming from, then I think that we're destined to continue to elevate ourselves, to continue to educate ourselves, to do what's best for ourselves, for our clients. And I really, really appreciate your time today. It's been wonderful, and look forward to what you're able to do at the Drakeley Pool Company in the coming years.
Well, I think this is great. I just want to commend this whole podcast. When I first heard about it and saw the interview with Skip Phillips, I was shocked, because it was you with under the umbrella of your firm and your brand doing something that is so altruistic and so good for the industry. It's accessible, and I'm really honored to have been a part. So thank you very much for having me.
Thanks, Lily.